So I've opened a new project inside After Effects. I've got this blank workspace. Up here in the Project tab, I'm going to right click and do Import, File. Now I had called mine image before After Effects to keep them all straight. So I'm going to double click on that to open it up. This is really important. Yours will probably not say this right off the bat. Yours will probably say footage right here in import kind. Footage won't work for what we need. We need to switch it to composition-retain layer sizes and make sure that the option for editable layer styles is selected and press OK. And these two guys will pop up inside your project tab. And all I need to do to add this to my timeline is to double click on the top one that says composition. And what it's done is added all of my layers into the timeline. And just like Photoshop, you can see I have my little eyeball, which will turn some of these layers visible or invisible. And we're sort of ready to go. To go over the interface a little bit, we've already sort of interacted with the project tab. Any sort of resources that we want to bring into our new project will come through this project tab. We have sort of our obvious main workspace here where we'll see what we're doing. The timeline's down here. So the way this works is all of these layers are existing right now for the entire duration of the composition, which right now is 30 seconds. If I were, for example, to take this Happy Halloween layer, which is just the words Happy Halloween, and I were just to shift this layer over to the 2-second mark, what's going to happen is that layer does not exist between 0 and 2 seconds. If I press the spacebar, I can get a preview of what I've done so far. So I'm going to press the spacebar, and you'll see the indicator move across the timeline. And right at the 2-second mark, that layer sort of jumped into existence. But I'll slide it back for now. And actually, I'm just going to make that layer invisible to start with. So as I said, I've got my entire timeline here, which is 30 seconds. I can change the way I view that down here. So right now, I'm seeing the entire length of the composition, no matter how long it is, with this sort of smaller mountain icon. If I move over, I'm not changing the length of the composition at all. All I'm doing is changing what I see, and right now I'm making it much, much longer to look at, but I haven't changed the length. I'm seeing individual frames. So that way, if I want to make really fine adjustments that happen very quickly, I can change the view to that. But for now, I want to be able to see the entire composition on my timeline. So let's add our first effect, and in so doing we'll sort of learn about how After Effects and programs like it, how they actually function. So over in the Effects and Presets, I'm going to go ahead and search. You can find these manually just by going down the various menus. It's much easier to search for what you want. What I'm looking for is the glow effect. So it pops up right down here under Stylize, and I'm literally just going to drag it down onto the layer that I want it to be on. And we're actually going to make the castle lights glow. So hopefully, as I instructed, you made the castle lights its own layer. So I'm going to drop that on there. And not much has really changed. It's really kind of hard to see. But if I come up over here where my project tab used to be, now I have my controls for this particular effect. And there's a lot of things going on here that we're actually going to play with. So we can take some of the obvious things like radius and intensity. So if I were to bump up the intensity, I can either click and drag to slide the values over, or I can click and write values in. So if I were to make it like 50, it's actually kind of hard to see unless I sort of... Now if you look closely at the castle, and what I'm doing is I'm sliding the radius of the glow back, out, and in, which is sort of the effect that we're going to be doing here in just a second. You can see as I move to the right and make the radius larger, it sort of radiates out from the house. That's what I'm going for right now. But what I want to happen is over time, I want these values to change And that's what we're going to use keyframes for, and that's the main concept that we have to get our minds around to use software like After Effects for the first time. So glow intensity of 50 is probably a bit much. I'm going to pump it back down to 10. And so we're actually going to go ahead now, and right now we have a glow that's just sort of using the color of the lights itself. To make it pop a little bit more, I'm actually going to change the color. So down here we have a color A and a color B. And I'm going to choose sort of maybe like a reddish color and sort of an orangey color. And you'll see it right now that they're set to mix sort of half and half, 50%. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that the glow colors are set to A and B colors. It might be set to original on yours, but you want to set it to A and B, and that way it'll use these colors down here and not the original colors of the lights themselves. I think setting the colors a little bit different sort of makes it pop a bit. And you'll see that as I move the intensity slider, excuse me, I meant to use the radius slider, I'm getting more of a red-orange glow now. So let's dive into actually animating the scene. Make sure that your time indicator is all the way back at 0. One way to do that is to press the home key if you're using a PC. But make sure it's there. And you'll see for all of these attributes, I have a stopwatch on the left-hand side. And when I click the stopwatch, what I'm telling After Effects is this value is going to change over time. So I'm going to go ahead and lock in the value of the radius right now at 0, and I'm going to press the stopwatch. So now After Effects knows that value is going to change. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this slider over to about the 2-second mark, and I'm going to change the radius to about 84. And so what it's done, it's saved those values. So if I bring the time indicator back to 0, my radius is back to 0. If I slide it over to the 2-second mark, it's back over around 82. So if I come back and I press the spacebar to preview what I've done, you see that what happened was I had locked in the value at 0, then locked in the value at 2 seconds, and then After Effects filled in the things in between. If I press the U button, I can actually see these things called keyframes. Keyframes are those moments in time where I set the value of something. So right now, the only keyframes in my scene are these 2 keyframes for the glow radius, because I haven't changed any other features by using the stopwatch. Another way to visualize this is the graph view, which I can access right here. And what's happened is it actually puts it on a graph now, and you can see the value of my glow radius starts at 0, and over the course of 2 seconds, it ramps all the way up to this value of 84. And all I did was set the beginning and the end, and After Effects will automatically make it go up linearly so that it goes from 0 to 84 in a nice linear fashion. So now it's just a matter of taking that glow and changing the value every few seconds. But I'll tell you what, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking I probably don't need a full 30 seconds for this project. That's going to go on for probably a bit too long. So I'm going to go up to the composition and go to composition settings. And let's knock that down from 30 seconds down to 15. It'll make the file a lot smaller, and it'll also make it easier for us to animate. So I've had it going to a radius of 84 at a 2-second mark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the time indicator and I'm going to go to the 4-second mark, so 2 seconds later, and put that glow radius back down to 0. And then see the graph view gets updated. So the value goes up for the first 2 seconds and back down for the 2 seconds. And I'm just going to repeat this process all the way through my composition. I'll go to 8 seconds and I'll drop it back down. Alright, I'll pause because there's no need for you to watch me do this over and over again. So now I've got my glow going up and down throughout the course of the entire thing. But I'll do one more thing to make it look a little bit better. If I slide the time indicator here, you can see the glow go up and down. but it's kind of jagged. It goes straight up, it hits the top, it goes straight down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get all of these keyframes highlighted. So I'm going to click and drag a box around all these keyframes. And I've got this great function down here called Easy Ease. I'm going to click that. And it took that graph and it changed it just slightly so that as the values ramp up, they do it in a much more controlled, graceful manner. So as it nears the top, it sort of slows down, and then as it passes the top, it slows back into falling. And it's a slight difference, but it will actually make it look nicer. So most movement and things like that will look better if you ease them in and out, as we just did. Okay, the next thing I want to work on is the fog, and we're going to do a couple things to it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch it out so it's a little bit bigger, and I'll explain why I'm going to do that. I have my fog layer selected down here, and then I can just take these things on the end and pull them out to sort of stretch my fog out along that direction. And the reason I'm going to do that is because we're going to have the fog moving. But if I leave it the way it is now and we just move it across the screen, you see that obvious endpoint here on the left side where it just kind of gets cut off because that's where the edge of the screen was and there was no fog beyond that. If I stretch it out a bit and then I move it over here like this, as I move it over, there's new fog to take the place of the old fog that's passing through. So what I'm going to do is I stretch that along that way, and then I'm going to line it up so that we have plenty of room over here for new fog to be produced. Then, if I just down-click here on the fog layer itself, every layer has transform properties. One of those is position. So remember, I'm going to be moving the position of this fog. So I'm going to make sure that my time indicator is back here at the start. I'm going to click the stopwatch, telling After Effects that this is going to change over time. Then I'm going to move my time indicator all the way to the end of the composition, and I'll go ahead and I'll move the fog kind of like that. And now you see as I scrub through, or as I press spacebar, now the fog is moving across the screen because it filled in the distance between the start and the finish. Okay? If I want my fog to move slower, I should move it less. If I want it to move quicker, I would move it more. It would have more distance to cover in the same amount of time, which would make it go faster. Okay? The next thing we're going to do to the fog is we're going to add another preset to it. And I've already gone searching for it. It's called Fractal Noise. Let me zoom in a little bit so you get a good view of it when I clap it on there. So I'm going to take Fractal Noise, drop it on the fog layer, and right away you see it sort of has some texture now that it didn't have before. And there are a lot of things here for you to play with. The fractal type especially. I kind of like the look of dynamic progressive, but you can scroll through those and see what you like the best. There's this noise type that'll make some slight differences. You can do the invert if you like the way that looks better. But what we're actually going to animate here is the evolution. So if I take this and I just slide it, keep an eye on the fog itself. You see how it sort of undulates? Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the stopwatch, telling After Effects this is going to change. I'm going to move to the end of my composition. And this time, since it's going to go over the course of 15 full seconds, I'm not going to change this number on the right here, which just goes around the clock or the sort of the dial face once. I'm going to do the number on the left, and I'll make it something like 5. And then as I scrub through it, not only is it moving now, but it's sort of undulating and sort of moving like fog would. You might have noticed that there's a bit of fog back here. It's actually fog that's in front of my house. I had 2 fog layers. I have this one, fog in front of the castle, because I thought it gave the image some depth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to animate and change the position of this fog as well. but to give it sort of a more lifelike appearance, I'm going to make it move a little slower than the fog in the background. So I'll do that and I'll be right back. Next up is our friendly flying witch. We're going to move her across the screen. And if you think about it, you actually already have the skills to do this, but maybe not in a very realistic manner. So I have my flying witch layer right here. I can see that's definitely her. I showed you that you could go down to the transform properties and grab position. So we could start her there. We could click the stopwatch, move to the end of the composition, and then we could simply move her position over there. And this wouldn't be terrible. She flies in a perfectly straight line, which is sort of what isn't my favorite part about that. So we're going to learn how to make a quick path that's got a slight bend to it, which I think will actually go a long way to making that look more realistic. I'm going to unclick that so that we get rid of that. So make sure I'm clicked on I have my flying witch layer selected, and I'm going to grab the pen tool up here. The pen tool is going to work pretty much the same in After Effects as it did in Photoshop, which means that I'm going to click once over here off the left-hand part of the screen around where the witch's position is. I'm going to come up here to the right part of the screen, off the screen as well, but when I click, I'm going to hold the mouse button down. I'm going to move the mouse slightly to make a curve. And once I like the curve I have, I'm going to release the left mouse button. Now, what happened here is this masks tab was added because this is actually considered a mask. And for now, just go with that. So I have mask 1. If I click on it, I can see it. I only have one mask. There it is. I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to go down to mask path. The mask path is the actual path it takes across the screen. I'm going to click the stopwatch, and now I need to copy it. So I'm going to press Control-C on a PC or Command-C on a Mac, and I've copied that mask path. Now I'm going to return to the transform for my witch. I'm going to go to her position, click the stopwatch, and do Control-V or Command-V to paste. Now, one thing did happen, and that's that she got shifted down and to the right, and that would probably happen to you as well. It's got to do with things like the anchor point. So to fix that, I'm going to go to the anchor point right here. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to do Edit Value. And this will allow me to sort of reset her where I want her to start at. I'm actually going to start her a little off the screen. I'm going to raise her up so she goes in front of the moon. And there we go. Now, the other thing you might notice is that I have 2 keyframes here. So she starts here, and 2 seconds later only, it defaults to a 2-second time interval, she ends over here. So she's going to fly across the screen fairly rapidly. You have complete control over that. If you want it to take her 4 seconds, you simply take this keyframe, move it over to the 4-second mark. She takes the exact same path, but now she has 4 seconds to get there, which means that she's going to go slower. You might consider making her start her journey towards the middle of the composition to add a little bit of sort of unexpectedness. So I'm going to bring this rightmost keyframe. We'll have her end her journey around the 12-second mark and begin her journey around the 8-second mark. And this way the scene's going, but she doesn't make her appearance until that 8-second mark. And then she leaves the scene and she just hangs out here off the screen where the audience can't see for the rest of the composition. Let's add some lightning. And the more I've thought about it, I went back and looked at the one I showed you at the beginning of the first video. I don't really like those lightning strikes, but I'm going to sort of keep sort of a white flash in the scene to sort of act like lightning. So what we're going to do to make that happen is over here in our layers, I'm going to right click and make a new adjustment layer, which I am going to call, if it'll let me change its name, we're going to call this lightning. And what happened here is I made a mistake that you might have made already, but you might make at some point, is I double clicked on this what happens is right now I am only seeing the lightning layer. If I look up here, what's actually active is just the lightning layer, which is just white. If I go back to my composition, I see what I should actually see. So I've got this layer right now, nothing's on it. It's just sort of there as a placeholder for us to change some things to get these lightning flashes. So I'm going to go over here to Effects and Presets, and I'm going to look for an effect called Levels. And I'm going to drop a Levels on there. And by changing the levels of an image, apparently nothing happens. Oh, I see why. I had clicked the, there we go. I had turned the layer invisible for a second by accident. So, that's when nothing was happening. You see what happens when I change the layers, the levels here, is that I can really easily whitewash the scene out real quickly. So, here's what we're going to do. I don't want it to happen right away, so I'm going to bring the time indicator over to, like, let's say the 4-second mark. And when I move this one, I'm actually changing the output black. So what I'm going to do is here, I'm going to click the histogram stopwatch, which is saying I'm going to be changing these over time. And what I've done is I've locked them in right here at the 4-second mark. And I'm going to expand my view so that I'm seeing individual frames here. So right now there are 30 frames per second. So I'm dividing a second into 30 pieces, which makes making small changes much easier. I'm going to move the time indicator just a few frames ahead. And I'm going to adjust this so I can almost can't see anything at all. Then I'm going to move it back, or I'm going to move it forward again just a few frames, and I'm going to slide that back to normal. So now if we've done this properly, as we watch, we get a quick flash as though lightning were striking the scene. And you can play with it a little bit to draw it out a little bit longer, perhaps. I'm going to press the U key, which allows me to see these keyframes I just made. And I'm thinking maybe I should draw it out just a little bit. So I think I'll pull these around just a bit, stretch them out, and see if I... Perfect. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag a box around those 3 keyframes. I'm going to press Control C. And then I'm going to bring the time indicator over here. I'm going to press Control V, or Command V on a Mac. And I just pasted those keyframes here. So what I was doing is I'm just adding a second lightning flash. So anytime I want a new lightning flash now, I can just copy these 3 keyframes and put them wherever I want them. So if I want to have another one over here, let's zoom out of a little bit. I put the time indicator where I want it. I press Control V, and let's do a final couple of them over here. Now throughout my scene, I'm getting lightning flashes. And since we've gone to the trouble of adding our lightning flashes, I'm going to add one more thing. I'm going to go to the Effects and Presets, and I'm going to search for one called CC Rainfall. I'm going to drop that on the lightning adjustment layer, and you'll see not only has it added raindrops, but as I scroll through the scene, they're actually pre-animated. So now we have sort of a rainy Halloween night. The CC Rainfall preset comes with all kinds of different settings you can change. These settings don't need to change over time, so we're not going to press the stopwatches or anything, but you can change the number of drops, for example, the size of the drops, speed, how far the wind. So the wind would actually have them, now they're slanted, which actually I think adds a little bit to it. things like color, all kinds of things that you can play with on your own. Keep in mind that the more raindrops you add, you're going to sort of slow things down because now the computer has to sort of create many, many more thousands of raindrops. So just keep in mind that pumping up the number of drops, to 15,000 might actually cause After Effects to crash. But now a nice rainy scene like that. Which leaves us with only really one thing left to do, and that's to add our text. Way back in the beginning, we had turned this Happy Halloween layer off so you couldn't see it. And at this point, what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to press the U key again so I can see those keyframes for the lightning. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the Happy Halloween layer, the whole thing, I'm going to drag it over, and I'm going to line it up with the end of this second lightning flash. And I think this creates kind of a neat effect. Lightning flashes. Oh, I still have it turned off. Invisible, rather. So let's try that again. I just scroll through. Lightning flashes, and when the lightning dissipates, the text is there, as though the lightning created the text. I'm going to slide it over just a little bit more. So it's as though the lightning created the Happy Halloween effect, which I think is pretty cool. You can line it up how you want. If you want to do it differently, that's up to you. A couple things I did to make the Happy Halloween a little bit more interesting is I added a glow effect to it. So I need to come back over here, type in glow. We've done this already, so it should be fairly easy. It added a sort of a black glow because it's still set on using the original colors and not on A and B, which I should change to something more interesting. And then I can just bring the glow radius out. Let's see. Let's put it on top. Let's bring the intensity up a bit. What am I missing? Something is not. Ooh, that's what I needed to change. So I needed to change from color channels to alpha channel, and I need to bring that way back down. Okay, that actually looks pretty nice. I like the way that looks. So I've got sort of an orange and a yellow feel. It seems very Halloween-y. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to, right here, let's go ahead and animate sort of the glow a little bit. Let's do the color phase a little bit, and we'll move over here, and I'll change that to like 3, and the colors will just sort of undulate a little bit. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Very nice. If you remember my example, I also added a few things, like one that I really enjoyed was this one called Burn Film. I'm going to drop onto Happy Halloween, and what it does is if I pump up the burn, it's as though it was film going through a projector and the film actually got burned. So it's a neat way to sort of make the Happy Halloween go away after a few seconds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the burn right here at my 11-second mark. I'm going to move ahead a few seconds. I'm going to turn the burn all the way up to 100. So over the course of those 3 or 4 seconds, it goes from being there to not being there. You could, of course, go through and look for some different effects. So of all these categories, you might have the most luck looking in one, the one called Stylize. That's where I just got the burn film one. And there's a few that you can play with. It will make the text look differently. There might be a way to animate them to make it look interesting. I think in my first one, I'd also added this thing called scatter, which if we zoom in and we turn the scatter up, so as it burned, I also had it sort of scatter into nothingness, which means something else you could do just to make it look a little bit more creepy. So there's all kinds of things you can play with. These are just the basics, but as long as you understand how keyframes work and how the values change over time and how to set those keyframes, then you can do a lot with Adobe After Effects.